Victoria Sterling had everything money could buy, but she was about to lose the only things that truly mattered. What happened next would change everything she believed about worth, dignity, and the people she had spent her entire life looking down upon. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in Beverly Hills, California, when Victoria Sterling stood in her marble-floored kitchen, barking orders into her phone while simultaneously checking her reflection in the polished chrome of her $15,000 espresso machine. At 42, Victoria was the picture of calculated perfection. Every blonde hair in place, her designer workout clothes pressed to perfection, even though she hadn't exercised in months. Her personal trainer came to her. "I don't care what the shareholders think, Marcus," she snapped into her phone, her manicured nails drumming against the Italian marble countertop. "The acquisition goes through today, or I find new lawyers. Do you understand me?" At 38, Rosa had the kind of invisible presence that wealthy people preferred in their help. Someone who could clean around them without being noticed. Someone whose opinion was never asked and rarely considered. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform pressed but obviously inexpensive. She had been working for the Sterling family for 3 years, arriving before dawn and leaving after dark, 6 days a week. Victoria had never asked Rosa about her life, her family, or her dreams. To Victoria, Rosa was simply part of the house, like the marble countertops or the imported light fixtures, reliable, quiet, and easily replaceable. "Mommy, I can't find my soccer cleats." 7-year-old Ethan Sterling came running into the kitchen, his dark hair tousled from sleep, still wearing his Spider-Man pajamas. His twin sister Emma followed close behind, her princess nightgown trailing behind her like a cape. "Rosa will find them," Victoria said without looking up from her phone. "Rosa, deal with the children. I have a conference call in 10 minutes that could make or break a $20 million deal. Let's go check the mudroom, mijo," she said gently, using the Spanish endearment that always made the twins smile. Her English was accented but clear, warm in a way that Victoria's never was. "Will you make us pancakes, Rosa?" Emma asked hopefully, taking Rosa's hand. "Of course, Princessa, after we find those cleats." She had built Sterling Technologies from the ground up after her divorce 5 years ago, turning a small software company into a Silicon Valley powerhouse. She worked 16-hour days, traveled constantly, and had exactly 3 things in her life that mattered: her company, her reputation, and somewhere far down the list, her children. The twins adored Rosa in a way that Victoria told herself didn't bother her. Rosa was the one who remembered that Ethan was afraid of thunderstorms, and that Emma only ate her sandwiches if they were cut into triangles. Rosa knew their favorite bedtime stories, and never forgot to leave their bathroom light on because darkness scared them. Victoria told herself she was building an empire for her children's future. She would give them everything she never had: private schools, expensive vacations, connections that would guarantee their success. What she didn't give them was time, attention, or the simple presence that Rosa provided every single day. But Victoria Sterling was about to learn that some things couldn't be bought, and that the person she had treated as invisible for 3 years possessed something that no amount of money could purchase. "I'll be in my office," Victoria announced to no one in particular, already halfway out of the kitchen. "Don't let the children bother me unless someone is bleeding or the house is on fire." Victoria emerged from her office exactly once, grabbed her coffee, and disappeared again. She had 4 more conference calls before lunch, a presentation to finalize, and a dozen emails that required immediate attention. The sounds of her children's laughter drifted down the hallway, but she barely heard them. "Rosa, we're going to be late," Ethan called out at 7:45, his backpack already on his shoulders. "Coming, amor," Rosa responded, quickly packing their lunches into small coolers decorated with their favorite cartoon characters. She knew Ethan liked his apples sliced, and Emma preferred hers whole. She knew to pack extra napkins because Emma was messy, and she always included a small note in each lunchbox, sometimes in English, sometimes in Spanish, always with a heart drawn in the corner. Victoria's assistant, a polished young woman named Jennifer, arrived at exactly 8 p.m. to drive the twins to school. This was another service Victoria paid for because she couldn't be bothered with the mundane task of school drop-offs. "Be good for Miss Jennifer," Rosa told the twins, giving each of them a quick hug. "I'll see you after school. We'll work on it together." After the children left, the house settled into its usual rhythm. Victoria worked from her home office, participating in video conferences with executives in New York, London, and Tokyo. Rosa moved through the house like a gentle ghost, cleaning, organizing, and maintaining the perfection that Victoria demanded. At 10:30 a.m., Rosa was upstairs in Victoria's bedroom, carefully making the bed with hospital corners and arranging the decorative pillows in the exact configuration Victoria preferred. She had learned Victoria's standards through trial and error, enduring criticism and occasional harsh words until she understood exactly what was expected. Rosa never complained, never argued, never showed anything but quiet competence and respectful deference. What Victoria didn't know was that Rosa noticed everything. She saw how Victoria's hands shook slightly when she thought no one was looking. She noticed the prescription bottles hidden in Victoria's bathroom drawer. She was aware of the late-night phone calls filled with anxiety and desperation. Rosa had her own struggles, her own burdens that Victoria had never bothered to learn about. Every morning, Rosa took 2 buses and walked 6 blocks to reach the Sterling mansion. Every evening, she reversed the journey to return to a small apartment in East Los Angeles that she shared with her elderly mother and her 15-year-old nephew, Diego. Her mother, Rosa Martinez, had been battling diabetes for years. The medications were expensive, and even with Rosa's job, money was always tight. Diego was a good kid, but he needed things, school supplies, clothes that fit, opportunities that cost money Rosa barely had. Rosa had dreams once. She had been studying nursing at UCLA when her father died suddenly, leaving the family with nothing but debt and heartbreak. Rosa had dropped out to work full-time, sacrificing her future to keep her family afloat. She told herself it was temporary, that she would go back to school someday. But temporary had stretched into 15 years. Working for Victoria Sterling was just another temporary solution that had become permanent. The pay was better than most housekeeping jobs, and Victoria, for all her coldness, was at least predictable. Rosa knew what was expected, and she delivered without fail. What Victoria didn't know was that Rosa was overqualified for her job in ways that would have shocked her. Before dropping out of nursing school, Rosa had been an honor student with a particular talent for emergency medicine. She had volunteered with paramedics, worked in hospital emergency rooms, and had once saved a man's life in a restaurant when he went into cardiac arrest. Rosa carried knowledge and skills that could have taken her anywhere, but circumstances and loyalty to her family had kept her in jobs far beneath her capabilities. She watched medical dramas on television and still remembered every procedure, every protocol, every life-saving technique she had learned years ago. But none of that mattered to Victoria Sterling, who saw only a maid who was good at following orders. At 11:15 a.m., Rosa was in the twins' playroom, organizing their toys and books, while Victoria's voice echoed from downstairs, sharp and demanding as she berated someone on the phone about missed deadlines and unacceptable performance. Rosa shook her head sadly. She had watched Victoria for 3 years, and despite all the wealth and success, she could see that Victoria was deeply unhappy. She worked constantly but never seemed satisfied. She had everything but acted like it was never enough. Rosa had grown up with very little, but her childhood had been filled with laughter, family dinners, and parents who made time for what mattered. Victoria's children were growing up in a palace, but Rosa could see they were hungry for something money couldn't buy. They craved their mother's attention, her approval, her presence. Instead, they got expensive toys and the promise of future opportunities, while their emotional needs went unmet. Rosa had become the consistent, caring adult in their lives, almost by accident. She didn't set out to become their surrogate mother, but when a child falls and needs comfort, when they're scared of monsters under the bed, when they want to share an exciting story about their day, they turn to whoever is present and listening. That person was never Victoria. It was always Rosa. At 12:30 p.m., Rosa was preparing lunch for herself and Victoria. She made a simple salad for Victoria, who barely ate anyway, and heated up leftover soup for herself. She ate quickly in the kitchen, standing up, ready to resume work the moment Victoria needed something. Victoria emerged from her office looking frustrated and exhausted. A deal she had been working on for months was falling apart. Investors were getting cold feet. Competitors were circling like vultures. "Rosa, I need you to reschedule my entire afternoon," Victoria said without looking at her. "Cancel my hair appointment, move the 3 p.m. meeting to tomorrow, and call my lawyer. Tell him I need to see the Patterson contracts immediately." Victoria grabbed her salad and disappeared back into her office. Rosa could hear her on the phone, her voice rising with frustration as she tried to salvage the deal that was supposed to secure Sterling Technologies' expansion into Asian markets. Rosa continued her work, moving through the house with quiet purpose. She cleaned the guest bathrooms that no one used, dusted furniture that was already pristine, and organized closets that were already perfectly arranged. Victoria's standards were impossibly high, and Rosa had learned to exceed them consistently. At 2:15 p.m., Rosa was in the laundry room, carefully sorting Victoria's designer clothing. Each piece required special care, and Rosa had become expert at reading care labels and understanding which fabrics needed which treatment. She hand-washed delicate items, used special detergents for different colors, and pressed everything with the precision of a professional. It was mindless work that allowed her thoughts to wander. She thought about Diego, who had a chemistry test tomorrow and needed help studying. She thought about her mother, who had a doctor's appointment next week that Rosa would have to ask for time off to attend. She thought about the nursing program at the community college that she had looked at online but couldn't afford to attend. Rosa had learned to keep her dreams small and manageable. She no longer fantasized about being a doctor or traveling the world. She hoped for stability, for her family's health, for Diego to get into college so he could have the opportunities she had missed. Working for Victoria Sterling provided that stability, even if it came with daily reminders of everything Rosa would never have. The house was filled with beautiful things that cost more than Rosa earned in a year. Victoria threw away food that could have fed Rosa's family for days. The twins' closets were filled with clothes they had outgrown or never worn. But Rosa never felt resentful. She had learned long ago that bitterness was a luxury she couldn't afford. She focused on what she could control, doing her job well, taking care of her family, and finding small moments of joy wherever possible. At 3 p.m., Victoria's conference call was not going well. Rosa could hear her voice through the office door, sharp with panic as the deal continued to deteriorate. Victoria had leveraged significant resources on this acquisition, and failure would mean serious financial consequences for Sterling Technologies. Rosa didn't understand the specifics of Victoria's business, but she understood stress and desperation. She had seen that look in Victoria's eyes before, usually late at night when Victoria thought no one was watching, when the mask of controlled perfection slipped and revealed the frightened woman underneath. Rosa quietly prepared a fresh pot of Victoria's favorite coffee and left it outside her office door with a small plate of the cookies that Victoria claimed she never ate, but that somehow always disappeared. At 3:30 p.m., the twins came home from school with Jennifer, their usual chatter filling the quiet house. Rosa immediately shifted into afternoon mode, helping them with homework, preparing snacks, and listening to their stories about friends, teachers, and playground adventures. "Rosa, Tommy said his dad is taking him camping this weekend," Ethan announced, spreading his math homework across the kitchen table. "Do you think Mommy would take us camping? Even when she's here, she's not really here." Months of work, significant financial investment, and carefully laid plans had collapsed in a single afternoon. "Did you finish your homework?" she asked the twins, but it was a perfunctory question. She was already thinking about damage control, about explaining the failure to her board of directors, about the competitors who would pounce on her moment of weakness. "Rosa helped us," Emma said hopefully, as if this might earn her mother's approval or attention. Victoria nodded absently and returned to her office. She had phone calls to make, strategies to develop, and a reputation to protect. Rosa watched this interaction with familiar sadness. Victoria was so focused on providing for her children's future that she was missing their present entirely. The twins were learning to seek emotional connection from Rosa because their mother was never emotionally available. At 5:30 p.m., Rosa began preparing dinner. Victoria rarely ate with the children, claiming work was too demanding, so Rosa cooked simple, kid-friendly meals that she knew Ethan and Emma would enjoy. Tonight was grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, comfort food that made the twins smile. Rosa ate with them, listening to their chatter about school and friends, helping Emma work through a disagreement with her best friend, and celebrating Ethan's good grade on his spelling test. These were the moments that Victoria was missing, the small but precious interactions that build relationships and create memories. After dinner, Rosa supervised bath time, while Victoria remained locked in her office. She helped the twins with their bedtime routine, read them stories, and tucked them in with the attention and care that Victoria was too busy to provide. "Rosa," Emma whispered, as Rosa turned off the bedroom light, "do you think Mommy loves us?" Sometimes grown-ups get confused about what children really need. Her commute home would take over an hour, 2 buses and a long walk, but she made this journey 6 days a week without complaint. Tomorrow would bring the same routine: arrive before dawn, care for the children, manage the household, remain invisible to Victoria, and return home exhausted but determined. As Rosa walked toward the front door, she heard Victoria on the phone with someone, her voice filled with anger and frustration as she discussed the failed deal and its consequences. Rosa paused for a moment, feeling an unexpected wave of sympathy for the woman who had everything but seemed perpetually miserable. Rosa understood struggle in a way that Victoria never had. She knew what it meant to work multiple jobs to pay rent, to choose between medication and groceries, to sacrifice personal dreams for family survival. But Rosa also understood something that Victoria had forgotten: that happiness came from relationships, not acquisitions, and that success was meaningless without people to share it with. As Rosa walked to the bus stop through the manicured streets of Beverly Hills, she thought about the contrast between her life and Victoria's. Rosa had very little money, but rich relationships. Victoria had unlimited resources but seemed isolated and unhappy. Rosa's small apartment was filled with laughter, family dinners, and people who genuinely cared about each other. Victoria's mansion was filled with expensive objects, but felt emotionally empty despite the presence of 2 beautiful children who desperately wanted their mother's love. But Rosa also knew that life could change in an instant. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new choices that could alter everything. She had no way of knowing that in less than 12 hours, a crisis would arise that would test everything she believed about courage, sacrifice, and the true measure of a person's worth. Rosa boarded the bus, settled into her usual seat, and began the long journey home. Behind her, Victoria Sterling continued working in her office, surrounded by the trappings of success, but isolated by her own choices and priorities. Neither woman could have predicted that the next day would bring a catastrophe that would force them both to discover who they really were when everything they thought they knew about themselves was stripped away. The house that seemed so secure, so perfectly controlled, was about to become the setting for a crisis that would reveal the true character of everyone inside it. And Rosa Martinez, the invisible maid who had been overlooked and underestimated for 3 years, was about to prove that sometimes the most valuable people are the ones we notice least. But that revelation was still hours away. And for now, both women continued their separate lives, unaware that tomorrow would change everything they believed about strength, courage, and what it really meant to be successful. The call came at 2:47 a.m. Victoria Sterling was jolted awake by the shrill ring of her phone, her heart already racing before she was fully conscious. 3 years of running a company had trained her to expect crisis calls at all hours, but something about the tone of the ring felt different, more urgent, more personal. "Mrs. Sterling?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional, but strained. "This is Officer Martinez with the Beverly Hills Fire Department. There's been an incident at your property on Maple Drive." "My children?" she gasped into the phone. "Are my children safe?" But when she turned onto Maple Drive, her worst fears materialized into a nightmare that would haunt her forever. Her house was engulfed in flames. Fire trucks surrounded the property, their lights casting hellish shadows against the night sky. Water cascaded from multiple hoses, but the fire seemed to mock their efforts, reaching higher and burning brighter with each passing moment. The smell of smoke was overwhelming, and Victoria could hear the terrible sound of her home being destroyed. But all of that became background noise the moment she saw Captain Rodriguez approaching her, with the expression every parent fears seeing on an official's face. "Mrs. Sterling? I'm Captain Rodriguez. Are you the mother of Ethan and Emma Sterling?" The fire started in the electrical system around 2:15 a.m. and spread rapidly. By the time our units arrived, the main staircase was already compromised and most of the second floor was inaccessible. The ceiling in the main hallway has collapsed, blocking access to the children's bedrooms. We're doing everything we can. All that mattered were two 7-year-old children who might be dying while she stood helplessly in the street. "Why didn't the sprinkler system work?" Victoria demanded, her voice cracking with panic and rage. Captain Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, there appears to have been some kind of system failure. We'll investigate thoroughly once we have the fire contained. But right now, our priority is search and rescue." She had spent every waking moment building Sterling Technologies to secure her children's future, and now they might not have a future at all because she hadn't been there to protect them. A commotion near the fire trucks caught her attention. Someone was arguing with the firefighters, trying to push past their barrier. Victoria squinted through the smoke and chaos and felt her heart stop. It was Rosa. Rosa Martinez, still in her nightclothes, was struggling against two firefighters who were trying to prevent her from entering the burning building. "Let me go!" Rosa was shouting in a mix of English and Spanish. "Those are my babies in there. I know this house better than anyone. I can get to them." The structure could collapse at any moment. Someone from the neighborhood called her when they saw the fire trucks. She's been trying to get inside ever since. Rosa broke free from the firefighter's grip and ran toward Victoria, her face streaked with tears and soot. "Mrs. Sterling, the children, are they? I've tucked them in every night for 3 years. I've kissed their scraped knees and chased away their nightmares. I know every inch of that house, every hiding place, every path to their rooms." "The firefighters can't get to them," Victoria said desperately. The hallway collapsed. "They're trapped. Something I should have told you years ago. I know how to navigate smoke-filled buildings," Rosa continued rapidly. "I know how to assess structural damage, how to find safe passages, how to treat smoke inhalation and burns. I dropped out of school 15 years ago when my father died, but I never forgot my training. But more importantly," Rosa said, her voice breaking, "I know that house like it was my own home. I know there's a servant's staircase in the back that the firefighters probably don't know about. I know that Ethan hides under his bed when he's scared, and Emma goes to the window seat in her room. I know exactly where they would be." "Ma'am, you're saying you have medical training?" For 3 years, Rosa had cleaned her house, cared for her children, and managed her household, all while being massively overqualified for the position. Rosa was an educated woman with life-saving skills who had been working as a maid because life had forced her to sacrifice her dreams. "Captain," Victoria said urgently, "if she knows the house and has medical training—" "Sterling, I can't officially authorize a civilian to enter a burning building, no matter what her qualifications, but—" He paused, looking at the inferno that was consuming the house. "My teams can't access the children's wing. The main staircase is gone, and we haven't been able to find another route. It's narrow and the firefighters probably missed it, but I've used it hundreds of times. I can get up to the children's rooms, assess their condition, and if they're alive, I can get them out. Sterling, for 3 years I've watched you miss bedtime stories because you were on conference calls. I've seen you skip school plays because you had meetings. I've held your children when they cried because their mother was too busy to notice they needed comfort. If you won't do it, I will, because someone has to love them enough to try." Captain Rodriguez was speaking urgently into his radio, consulting with his team leaders. The fire was getting worse, not better. Traditional rescue attempts had failed. Time was running out. "Mrs. Sterling," Captain Rodriguez said grimly, "my teams estimate we have maybe 20 minutes before the second floor becomes completely inaccessible." After that, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Victoria looked at Rosa. This woman she had underestimated and dismissed for years, and saw something she had never noticed before. Rosa had the eyes of someone who had faced real hardship and survived. Someone who had made difficult choices and lived with the consequences. Someone who understood that love wasn't a feeling you experienced, but an action you took, regardless of the cost. "Captain," Victoria said, her voice barely a whisper, "let her try. Gear up this woman for interior search and rescue." Sterling, love isn't about being noticed or appreciated. Love is about doing what needs to be done for the people who matter, regardless of whether anyone acknowledges it or not. Your children matter. They've always mattered. And if I die tonight trying to save them, at least I'll die knowing I loved them the way they deserve to be loved. Not the controlled tears of grief or frustration she occasionally allowed herself, but the raw, overwhelming sobs of a woman who was finally understanding the magnitude of her failures and the depth of another person's love. Rosa turned toward the burning house, flanked by 2 firefighters who would accompany her as far as safely possible. At the threshold of the building, she turned back to Victoria one last time. "Mrs. Sterling, if something happens to me tonight, I need you to know something. In my apartment, there's a notebook on my kitchen table. It's full of stories about Ethan and Emma, all the little moments you missed while you were working. Their first loose teeth, their funny questions about the world, their drawings and jokes and dreams. I wrote it all down because I thought someday you might want to know who your children really are." Victoria watched Rosa disappear into the smoke and flames, and for the first time in her adult life, she understood the difference between success and significance, between achievement and love, between building wealth and building a life that mattered. The next 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Victoria paced behind the fire trucks, her phone buzzing constantly with calls from colleagues, board members, and reporters who had heard about the fire. She ignored them all. For the first time in years, Sterling Technologies felt completely irrelevant. Captain Rodriguez kept her updated with terse radio communications from the teams inside. Rosa had reached the servants' staircase successfully. The structure was holding. She was climbing to the 2nd floor. Victoria found herself praying again, bargaining with God like she had as a child. "Take the company, take the money, take everything I've built, but please bring back my children and the woman who loves them more than I do." At 3:23 a.m., Captain Rodriguez's radio crackled with Rosa's voice, barely audible through the smoke and static. "I found them. They're alive but unconscious from smoke inhalation. Ethan was under his bed exactly where I expected. Emma was by the window seat. I'm administering oxygen and assessing their condition. You need to find another way out. Sterling, I didn't come here to leave your children. I came here to save them or die trying. That's what love looks like. Ethan is conscious now and can walk with assistance. I'm carrying Emma. The staircase is damaged but passable if we move quickly. I can't lose you too." Victoria stared at the burning house, watching flames consume everything she had thought mattered, while somewhere inside that inferno, a woman she had criminally underestimated was risking everything to save the only things that actually did matter. Captain Rodriguez was coordinating with his teams, positioning them at every possible exit point. Paramedics stood ready with equipment and stretchers. Everyone was focused on the same desperate hope, that Rosa Martinez could accomplish what seemed impossible. At 3:41 a.m., a shout went up from the firefighters positioned at the back of the house. "We've got movement! Someone's coming out!" Rosa emerged from the burning building, carrying Emma in her arms, with Ethan stumbling beside her, supported by a firefighter who had met them at the door. All 3 were covered in soot and coughing from smoke inhalation, but they were alive. Paramedics immediately swarmed around them, checking vital signs and administering oxygen. Victoria ran to her children, dropping to her knees beside their stretchers. "Mommy!" Ethan cried, reaching for her with arms that were shaking but strong. "We're okay, Mommy," Emma whispered, her voice hoarse from smoke. "Rosa saved us. She carried me when I couldn't walk, and she told us stories so we wouldn't be scared." But her eyes were bright with the fierce satisfaction of someone who had risked everything for love and won. "Rosa," Victoria whispered, not trusting her voice to be louder. Rosa looked at her with an expression Victoria had never seen before. Not the careful deference of an employee, not the invisible efficiency of hired help, but the direct gaze of an equal who had just proven her worth beyond any possible question. "Your children are going to be fine, Mrs. Sterling," Rosa said quietly. "They inhaled some smoke, but their lungs are clear and their vital signs are strong. They were scared, but they were brave." She wanted to understand how she had missed the fact that her maid was actually a highly trained medical professional. But what came out of her mouth was the only thing that really mattered. "Rosa, I'm so sorry. You've been taking care of my family for 3 years, and I never bothered to learn about your family. You have medical training that could have taken you anywhere, and I never asked why you were working as a housekeeper. Why were you working for me when you could have been saving lives in a hospital? I had to drop out of school to work full-time to support her and take care of my nephew, Diego, when my sister couldn't." Rosa had sacrificed her dreams to care for her family, then had spent 3 years caring for Victoria's family with the same dedication. And tonight, when it mattered most, Rosa had risked everything to save children who weren't even hers because that's what love required. "Rosa, your burns need proper treatment," the paramedic was saying. "You need to come with us to the hospital. The children should go first. You're the person who loves my children enough to risk your life for them. Your family, whether I've been smart enough to recognize it or not. But my children almost didn't survive because I've been prioritizing all the wrong things for years. That changes now." Sterling. She had been so focused on her own needs, her own schedule, her own priorities that she had never bothered to see Rosa as a complete human being with her own story, her own struggles, her own remarkable capabilities. At the hospital, Victoria insisted on staying with Rosa while doctors treated her burns and checked her for smoke inhalation. The children were in excellent condition, laughing and talking with nurses while being monitored as a precaution. But Victoria couldn't stop staring at Rosa's hands as doctors bandaged the burns she had sustained saving Emma and Ethan. Those hands had guided Victoria's children through 3 years of childhood, had comforted them through nightmares and celebrated their achievements. And tonight, those hands had literally pulled her children from a burning building at tremendous personal cost. "Rosa," Victoria said quietly while they waited for the doctor's final assessment, "I want you to know something. When I rebuild the house, I want you to help me design it. Not as my employee, but as someone whose opinion matters to me. You know my children better than I do, and you understand what makes a house a home in ways I never learned. Rosa, tonight I learned that the most valuable person in my life was someone I barely bothered to notice. I don't want to make that mistake again." The way you handled smoke inhalation treatment for those children was textbook perfect. Are you a medical professional? Rosa, all this time you've been qualified to save lives, and instead, you've been cleaning my house and raising my children. Rosa, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know there's no pressure, no expectation. If you could do anything with your life, if money wasn't an issue, what would you choose? I think about the people I could help, the lives I could save. There is no amount of money, no opportunity, no gesture that could repay what you've done for my family. Not as a loan, not as a favor that you'll owe me for, but as a small token of gratitude that doesn't come close to expressing what your sacrifice means to my family. Diego can work part-time after school and summers, and your mother can help with light housekeeping if her health permits. It's me finally recognizing the value of someone I should have appreciated years ago. Rosa, I'm going to take care of my own children. Tonight I realize that I've been so busy providing for their future that I've been missing their entire childhood. Sterling Technologies will survive with less of my attention, but my children won't get these years back. Not as an employee, but as family, because that's what you've been all along, even when I was too blind to see it. You've been loving my children better than I have for 3 years. It's time I learned how to do the same. Victoria's phone had been buzzing constantly with calls about the fire, about insurance, about Sterling Technologies' stock prices and board meetings and all the urgent business that had consumed her life for years. She turned the phone off. For the first time in years, Victoria Sterling had her priorities straight. Her children were alive, the woman who had saved them was safe, and everything else could wait until tomorrow. As dawn broke over Los Angeles, Victoria watched Rosa sleep and marveled at the courage, skill, and love that had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. She thought about the notebook Rosa had mentioned, full of stories about Ethan and Emma's childhood that Victoria had been too busy to witness. She thought about all the bedtime stories she had missed, the school plays she had skipped, the scraped knees she hadn't kissed, the dreams and fears and joys she hadn't shared because conference calls and board meetings had seemed more important. Victoria Sterling had spent years building an empire, but Rosa Martinez had been building something far more valuable, a relationship with 2 children who needed love more than luxury, attention more than achievement, presence more than presence. When Rosa woke up 2 hours later, she found Victoria sitting beside her children, reading them a story from a book the hospital had provided. It was the first time Rosa had ever seen Victoria read to Ethan and Emma, and the children were mesmerized by their mother's undivided attention. "Good morning," Rosa said quietly, not wanting to interrupt the rare moment of connection. Victoria looked up with a smile Rosa had never seen before. It was soft, genuine, and filled with a peace that had been missing from Victoria's face for years. "Good morning, Rosa. How are your hands feeling? How are the children? But you don't need me to teach you how to love your children. You just need to be present with them." That question broke my heart because I realized my children weren't sure of my love. They were sure of yours, but not mine. I never want them to question that again. "Rosa, when you start nursing school, I want you to know that Ethan and Emma will be fine because I'm finally going to be the mother they need. And when you graduate and start saving other people's children, you'll know that you saved mine in every way that matters." In the audience, Victoria Sterling sat with Ethan and Emma, all 3 of them cheering louder than anyone else in the auditorium. Victoria had kept every promise she made that night in the hospital. Rosa's tuition was paid in full. Her mother, Elena, was working part-time helping to manage Victoria's new, smaller house, built with safety features and warm family spaces that Rosa had helped design. Diego was thriving in school and working summer jobs that Victoria had helped him find. But more importantly, Victoria had transformed herself from a workaholic CEO into a present, engaged mother. She still ran Sterling Technologies, but the company no longer consumed her life. She attended every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. She knew her children's friends' names, their favorite foods, their bedtime routines, and all the small details that Rosa had been carrying alone for years. Victoria had learned to see people not as functions or employees or obstacles to her success, but as complete human beings with their own stories, dreams, and immense value. She had become the kind of employer who knew her staff's families, who celebrated their achievements, and who understood that treating people with dignity and respect created better outcomes than fear and indifference ever could. Rosa graduated summa cum laude and was immediately hired by the trauma department at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where her calm competence and gentle bedside manner made her a favorite among patients and colleagues alike. But every Sunday, Rosa still came to Victoria's house for dinner, not as an employee, but as family. She helped Ethan with his science projects and listened to Emma's stories about school. She was the children's honorary aunt, the woman who had loved them when love was dangerous and who continued to love them as they grew. On quiet evenings, when the children were doing homework and the house was peaceful, Victoria would sometimes look at Rosa and remember the night that changed everything. The night she learned that the most valuable people are often the ones we notice least, and that real success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by how well you love the people who matter most. Rosa had taught Victoria that heroism isn't always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's getting up at dawn every day to care for children who aren't yours. Sometimes it's sacrificing your dreams to support your family. Sometimes it's walking into a burning building, because love requires courage, and courage requires action. Victoria Sterling had built an empire, but Rosa Martinez had built something more lasting, a legacy of love that would live on in the hearts of 2 children who learned that their worth wasn't measured by their achievements, but by their capacity to care for others. And in a small notebook that Victoria kept in her desk drawer, She continued Rosa's tradition of recording the small, precious moments of her children's lives, making sure that no story, no achievement, no moment of joy or growth would ever be overlooked again. Because Rosa Martinez had taught her that paying attention to the people you love isn't just a gift you give them. It's a gift you give yourself, and it's the only gift that truly matters in the end. The maid who saved everything had saved more than just 2 children from a burning building. She had saved a family from burning bridges, saved a mother from missing her children's childhood, and saved 2 little hearts from wondering if they were truly loved. And sometimes, when people asked Victoria Sterling about the secret to her success, she would smile and tell them about a woman named Rosa Martinez, who taught her that the most successful life is one lived in service to the people who matter most, and that real wealth isn't what you have in your bank account, but what you have in your heart. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more stories that will remind you what really matters in life.